live. Does everybody see it?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. So mine is about tectonics and pressures, and what I train my kids to do is anything that I have yellow, they need to do something active in that box. So the column over here is where they're actually put their answers, and then I kind of have an idea of what they're supposed to be doing for that row, and then the materials are in the middle. And because a lot of my students end up getting blocked from the internet for, behavior reasons, I make sure all my links either go to articles that I've made as a Google Doc or a YouTube video or something that I maybe have recorded and saved in my Google Drive, because they can access files that have a Google Drive link instead. And I'm really a big fan of things that show animations or graphic stuff. And so this one here, as part of my instruction for that day, we would have already talked about tectonics and how things move around. And so this is just a little bit deeper. And actually this first activity in class, we would have drawn the 4 layers of the earth. They would have already taken a selfie and been able to insert it here. So for every kid, they start with one answer already done. And what I added for this time is if they need to go back and see my instructional slides, this is a link that goes back to what they would have done. And I gave them days to this Hyperdoc. And this is the second year that I've used it, so I've had to reword things a little bit because kids were a little confused, because there are kind of different terms for earthquakes. So I made sure they understood what they're doing there. And some people, a lot of kids don't understand that when there's a YouTube, there's usually a paragraph underneath that has some description, and that's where I got 2 answers. So this year I edited to make sure they know where they're looking. And a lot of them are having trouble with that. I put this in the middle. I'm sorry, there's a emergency vehicle. That this resource goes to 2 questions. So that's something I've had to kind of play with to make sure they understand it, especially if I center it.
Okay, I think Corey is done, so I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. So I teach 6th and 8th grade social studies, and I normally make mine on Google Slides. I've gotten a lot more comfortable with it the more I've used it. So this one I'm going to show today, we did during our virtual learning for a review of Rome and the fall of Rome. I normally only do Hyperdocs when I'm going to give them choices on things to look at, or if there are some topics I really want them to explore more. That's when I normally like using Hyperdocs because I can find a lot of resources for them. So this one, I kind of try to throw in a lot of stuff to just get their attention. So the Bitmoji extension, if you don't have that, I highly recommend getting that. You can do a lot of fun things with the Bitmoji extension. On Google Slides, it's nice because you can embed videos. This one, for instance, Mr. Nicky, my 6th graders love his ancient history videos. So we'd already listened to that when before school got out. So just one more time for that. On my Hyperdocs, I try to do a variety of videos and articles. With the virtual learning, it's been really nice to be able to attach PDFs that I have saved in my Google Drive so the kids could have access to them at home. So it was nice to be able to use that occasionally when I knew I had resources I liked, but I didn't get to see them face to face and use them like I would have done. I usually try to give them extras too if they want to explore other sites. So this one, they had a graphic organizer where they could just pick different topics of why Rome fell, review questions, so I could see which they thought was the biggest impact. I try to incorporate a lot of questions that aren't Googleable, so I can see what they got out of the information. This was a review. And then on this one, I did kind of a combination of a choice board as well, since this was our final week of Rome. And during the virtual learning, there were just some topics that we didn't have time to get to, but I wanted them to explore. So they had a choice of 5 different things, and I try to do a variety of activities for the different types of learners. So if they liked writing, there's a writing activity. If they like more graphic design, they could do that. But I really like with Google Slides how you can put in a link to go to another slide. So if they thought Pompeii would be something interesting, they could just click on Pompeii and be taken right to that slide. So I think that's really helpful in Google Slides to be able to do that on Hyperdocs. But whenever I make one, like I said, I do try to have a variety of activities. So this one, they could have done Snapchat story for Julius Caesar, Punic Wars. I had different articles and videos they could look at for that. And then they had a chart to just fill out questions. Pompeii, different videos, Google Street View of it. And then they had to write a letter as if they'd been there. For Roman inventions, they could research different ones, and then they picked their top 4 inventions and filled out this chart. And then the Circus Maximus, they could do kind of an ad to get people to come to the arena. So some of my kids that really like doing the graphic design stuff, they chose that for their option. And then I normally try at the end of my Hyperdocs to remind them to turn it in. That was something I'm sure all of you that were doing the virtual learning, having the kids remember to turn it in. So I do try to have at the end something to just remind them, please hit turn in so I can see that you're done. And then just to kind of go over what they were supposed to do on this. And then the other one I shared, I won't go all over it with you all, but it's more just basics of the culture of Rome. So if that's something you have to talk about in class, you can also look at that Hyperdoc. And that's all I have.
All right, I'll start and I'll bring mine up here in just a second. So with this right here, this is a unit review. It was designed for an AP class. And so with it being a unit review, I had to go in and think, okay, they already have a lot of these basic ideas and these basic formations. I do Hyperslides throughout the year, and really when determining when I'm going to do a Hyperslide, I think about, is this something that they're learning brand new information? Am I going to have a sub that day? Or is this going to be a unit review? So I don't do it with every unit. And it's really trying to focus on the units that have these big ideas and these overall themes that aren't going to be just basic memorization. Is these key essential questions specifically, what do I really want them to get to know? So with this, I decided I wanted to do a review. And because they had those basic foundations already, I was going to just kind of pull in from the standards and the curriculum those essential questions and pull resources from them. When I do these unit reviews, even without distance learning, I usually do a week for them in total. So they have their test date, I'll release it to them a week before, and I kind of pace out in the slides what I think their goals should be. This is what I'm aiming for you to complete by this day. This is what I want you to complete by this day. And I tell them that it's all tentative. They don't have to do it in that order. This is just something that I think that might be helpful for them to complete by the day that the test will be. If it is going to be an extension activity in class, so I teach maybe 90-minute blocks, so it'd usually be 45 minutes of kind of giving them the foundations and then another 45 minutes where they're doing this extension. They won't specifically have this pacing guide, but there will be something on the board or on the whiteboard, kind of what I want them to accomplish by the end. So it's not always a hard deadline. Students work at different paces. Students understand concepts at different rates. And usually with that, it's what is the main goal. When I give it to the students with a sub, it's more of the same ideas. They don't have to have it done by the end of the day, but this is what they should have accomplished when I check back with them. And we use Classroom. So I will upload it to Google Classroom, make a copy for every student, and then that way I can kind of go in and just peek on them sometimes to see exactly what they've completed. And students that aren't familiar with this, because they will be writing in the slides, I always make sure that they keep it in edit mode. If it's in presentation mode, they're not going to be able to write. So they have to keep it in edit mode, go through the slides, and that way they can actually respond to it. I use a mixture of articles, videos, and images. And I always put my directions at the top, usually in a gray or some different color that's going to hopefully be eye-appealing to the students. And I try to make it as literal as possible. So what I'll do is I'll actually make the slide, I'll pass it off to my husband. I'm like, can you read this? Like, what do you think that this is telling you to do? Because I want to make sure that the students are able to complete the directions without me there. And when he repeats back what I think that they do, if it's like completely off base, I'll reword to make sure that this is something that they can be able to do on their own. So here it links to an article, I think from ThoughtCo, and it gives them all of the definitions. And so over here in the left, this is what I want them to do. So again, try to make it as clear, concise, write the definition, place an X, and then why they think it's important. And so hopefully here they're pulling from that previous knowledge that we did earlier in the year. And the article gives examples. So I'm hoping that they can pull from the article. If not, it can be something that we've discussed already. With the review, if I'm not there, in this case with distance learning, I really want to make sure that the students were aware of that essential knowledge. So up here at the very top, I put down kind of those key basics, what the students should be taking away from it. I'll bold, I'll highlight some important terms that they should be able to pull from and give them sometimes just brief background information. So here we're looking at the diffusion historically, looking at colonialism, imperialism, and trade. So the essential knowledge given in the curriculum is this first sentence in the second box and an example here. So this way that students have something to pull from in case you're reviewing something that maybe a student was absent for or earlier in the school year. And then I pull in a picture down here and then ask them, based on the chart, based on what was said above, can you explain what you think might be impacted? The next one, I incorporated a video. I kept the top two in just like those explanations so they can constantly refer back to. And this is where I think that was mentioned with one of the other presenters is I don't want just memorized information. I want you to be able to pull in those deeper understandings and then just explain what you see or what you hear in this video to really just kind of allow me to see the thought process and that thinking process. So again, I make sure the directions are in a different color than the text box. I don't know why I have it on here, but sometimes in the box that I want them to write their answer, I'll literally write your answer here so that they're aware this is where I want that answer to go. And I alternate it. So here, again, I kept that at the top just so the students are aware that this is still that same concept, that we're still connecting all of these previous slides together and hoping that they can understand this overarching theme of colonial imperialism and how these culture traits diffuse. They have vocab words up here. Sometimes I'll put in a link to that definition, but because they should have already had this, I didn't do it with this one. If it's with a sub, I'll link it to a definition, or I might link a quizzes so they can go and they can practice that. And then again, the article and that overarching, that essential question, how does it relate to the development? So what they're expected to do and what I tell them is that I don't want just a single answer. I want more of a thoughtful paragraph response. At the top, when I change my topics, I'll change it up here. So before it was historical, this is contemporary. So these two boxes over here are going to have some similarities, but again, it's going to pull from that essential knowledge in the curriculum, what I'm hoping that they can pull from. So they look at these bold words. This is what I want you to try to connect to those answers. So I pull in the word globalization down here. I alternate the sides of the videos. That way when the students are scrolling through the Hyperslides, that it doesn't look the same on every slide, that their eyes are kind of shifting from the right to the left to hopefully still keep them engaged. With this one right here, this is a pretty difficult concept for the students throughout the year. And so what I wanted to do with this one is, with these difficult concepts, I just want to tell them what it is. I don't want them to respond back to it. I really want them just to read it and then watch this video to connect it together. And hopefully it can help them a little bit better in understanding. But sometimes with these more difficult concepts or these terms, I will just provide as much information as possible. And I write it in a way that it would be as me speaking in front of the classroom. So if you can't be there with them, I kind of just write as I would talk in front of the room, try to make it so that it eliminates any questions or any confusion. I keep the pacing guide throughout the slides. That way, as students come up to this, they're like, okay, I'm done for the day. I can take a break. I can come back to this the next day. And then it just, again, kind of repeats itself throughout here. Some definitions on the left. I use a map here, trying to get like this distribution and pull in from some of these other areas. I don't have questions on all slides or activities that I want the students to do, because sometimes it's really just trying to understand that concept and connect to it. Over here, again, the video, trying to use what they've already done previously and again, make those overarching themes. Using pictures over here with the landscape with these languages on this map. And then with this right here, I created a link, and it really was a link just to kind of culture overall in general. And I wanted students just to kind of summarize what they've taken away from this review. So usually when I do these Hyperslides, I don't check every slide when students turn it in. I usually check the last couple of slides where I have this reflection and I can really understand what the students had thought of, how they responded. And that's going to be what I use to determine, do I need to reteach? Do they understand it? And hopefully we don't have to do as many reteaching. But if there are certain students, I can personalize some additional resources just for that student. I create a Google form. On this Google form, students will write down any concerns or questions that they want me to discuss. This one was geared more towards an FRQ with their AP test coming up. And I had this space right here for students to just kind of think as they work. So I wouldn't check this thought, but this is, as they're writing, as they're thinking, this is kind of like an open note for them. I don't know if it's on this link, but in that Google form, because I don't check everyone's Google Slides, in the Google form, I'll look to see what specific questions students have and use the Google form to go through students' Hyperslides if they have anything specific that they want me to look at. And that's really with what I do with Hyperslides, is I just, again, I think about how is it going to be used? Is this an extension? Is this the review? Is it with a sub? Do they have that background knowledge? If they do, more of those essential questions. If they don't have that background knowledge, what I try to do is I still try to create those overarching themes and then narrow down more specifics when I get back into the class, and really kind of just try to pace it out and help students not feel overwhelmed. And especially if we're going to be going into distance learning in the fall, I don't know what everyone's status is like. I know that's a concern with where I'm at, that this is something that I feel like students might be able to kind of reduce any anxiety or stress that they might feel with not having that teacher in front of them providing all of that information.
Okay, couple questions. How do you all grade? And do you usually give a week for completion, 2 weeks, or 3 days? How long do students have?
I use this as formative. I don't use this as a summative, so I don't actually assign a grade to it. What I'll do is, in our grade book, I can assign something as not for grading, so I can put that it's complete or not complete. That way, if it comes time to the test and I notice students struggling, I can say, okay, well, you didn't complete this. Let's go back. Let's kind of see that this might have been something that you used useful for. With it being a review, I don't assign those hard deadlines with it for review. This is when I think it should be done, because at least in my county, we're not giving those formative grades that should affect their overall grade. And with it being more of a review, I want students to just kind of really take it for what it is. And I know that sometimes students might not do work unless they're getting a grade for it. But in the class, I've kind of always set that expectation that it's an AP course, so it's kind of that college level course. So when I do this with more of my on-level kids, I still always encourage them that this is going to help you. This is going to let me know where you're at in your learning and where you're at in your understanding. And part of our school's policy is for them to reassess or retake a test, all of their work has to been done. So if they do not do well on a test and they want to reassess, okay, let's go back, let's actually do this reassessment, let's do this review before we take this test. And so that helps them actually complete it, because a lot of them at the time they take the test, if they don't do well, they don't want to have to go back. It's already done. We can actually do a review, and I can kind of go more in depth and give more specific feedback to their responses and their answers.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And I'm Emily Williams. I'm from Kansas. And I'm going to be talking to you guys about a Hyperdoc activity I do with the Roaring Twenties. Let's see here. There is the URL in case you still need it. This is an activity that actually I have set up in both a Hyperdoc format and a Hyperslides format. And the activity came about after a few years ago, after I realized I needed to cut off about 3 days of instruction on the 1920s. And so previously, this assignment over social changes in the 1920s was something that I would have the students break up into partners. They would select a particular social change, they would research it, they would write a news article, they would create a Time magazine cover, and then they would give a presentation. And so altogether that would take about 3 days. But a few years ago, I needed to cut off some time and I was going to be gone. So I needed something that I could leave for a substitute, and I didn't want to just leave a video. And so my thinking was, I still want them to get the same content, and I don't want to just leave a video, so how am I going to do that? And so in getting to think about that, ultimately I came up with this activity. So unlike the one that you previously saw that was, you know, something that might extend over a few class periods and is meant to cover a lot of information, this one is actually only meant to be done in one class period, which I teach blocks, so it's 85 minutes or so. Done in one class period and meant to cover just some specific social changes of the 1920s. So they would start off with this little kind of 4-minute video from the Century series that is from pulled up from YouTube. And then they go through a little investigation. The first part is an investigation. So they go through a series of slides in which they examine the social and cultural changes of America. Each topic contains a link or links to a web page with more information on the topic. Use that information to answer some related questions and then locate and insert an image. So I basically took the Time in the 20s activity that I had. I listed here's all of the social changes that I want them to cover. I made that into slides. So each slide is a particular change. The first one is technology. The next one is transportation. The third one's the Harlem Renaissance. So that's where I started. I still want them to be looking for images. So that was part of that original activity. They were going to make a Time magazine cover with images. So instead of me putting all of the images and the fun stuff into these slides, there's a space for them to go out and harvest an image, an authentic 1920s image over, you know, a new technology or new invention. They're going to insert that image. So I didn't do that for them. But here's where, instead of them looking for the research, I give them the link to the research. So they click that link, they read about science and technology, different discoveries, and I give them some questions to answer. The questions are pretty simple. They're not really, too thought-provoking, but they read the first question, they find the answer in the article, they answer the question, read the second one, answer it. The way I set this up, I know there's a lot of different file extensions or Google extensions you can come up with. Pear Deck, or is that what it is one of them. But I just use tables. I'm a fan of just inserting a table. And once you have it on one slide, it's pretty easy to just duplicate your slide. So I just use the tool to insert a table, wherever that is. Here it is. However many rows you want. And then the students can just type into the table. I like the congruity, the way everything, looks nice and neat on here. So you can set it up, and I do the same thing for my image. And then once they've copied and pasted the slideshow, they can just type their answers directly in there. And of course, whatever image you want to use for your hyperlink, I just picked a little clip art button here and then made my hyperlink there for the button. So each slide is a different topic. So technology and inventions, transportation. I had 2 different links here. The first one is automobiles. The second one is aviation advancements. And then everybody's presentation will look a little different once they've shared it back to me, because they'll have different images and things. The Harlem Renaissance, consumerism, the changing role of women, prohibition. This one actually have another video they're going to go to. And I saved this into Google Drive because it's one that I stole off of Good Morning America a long time ago, when they went into an authentic 1920s speakeasy in New York City. And so I saved it, and it's in my Google Drive now. So that one's actually not on YouTube. Pop culture, they always love to look at 1920s slang. They think that's so fun. One year I had to make Valentine's cards in 1920s slang. And then part 2, we get to the reflection. So now that they've done the investigation, they've got all the information, then I have them answer some questions. And so this is where I would come back the following class period, we would pick up with this. Now, if I was going to assign this to my AP students, instead of just a couple of short answer questions here, this I would actually make an LEQ. So this would be an LEQ prompt, something about, I don't know, to what extent were the social changes of the 1920s a reaction to World War I, the extreme response to World War I or something like that. So this wouldn't just be a couple of quick short answer questions, but for my on-level students, these are a couple of quick short answer questions. And then we would debrief this the following class period. And then again, a reminder, we use Canvas as our LMS. Submit it to Canvas to be graded. And a thank you. Now I do have, in some cases, my inclusion students, my SPED students, or even my English language learners have found these kinds of slideshows to be a bit overwhelming. So for them, I have created just a very simple Hyperdoc of the same thing. It has the same links, but instead of having to look at all of those slides and figure out what to do, they just answer the questions in the boxes and put their images over here. And they find that a little less overwhelming and seem to work through that a little bit better. And I'm totally fine making that accommodation for them. It's the same information, they're doing the same thing. It's just not quite as overwhelming because it doesn't have so much coming at them. So I found that to be something that is helpful often for my inclusion students, for my ELL learners, and even my foreign exchange students. So I'll often have that option. If they prefer that, I'll provide that for them. Do you guys have any questions I can answer? I'm going to stop sharing here. Any questions I can answer for you? I know it's pretty simplistic. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of some.
Loving the tips and the different formats.
Thank you.
Emily, this is really cool and differentiated as well. There's another comment. Julie, I will post the links again in a moment.
So how many of you have done Hyperdocs or Hyperslides before? Okay, awesome. So my name is Jessica Torres. I am a social studies coach here in Central Texas. I am in awe of the amazing things that these teachers and these ladies are doing, and so appreciative of Gabriel and this whole community. I think it's just phenomenal. So my job is to support teachers with the technical side of things and to help you kind of have the confidence to be able to kind of build your own. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. But I'm not going to go through all of my slides because we want to make sure that we have time to actually answer your questions and get you the help that you would like. My Bitly is here. Gabriel shared it a couple of different times. As we've gone through the presentations, there were a couple of things that the ladies pointed out that I really wanted to re-emphasize as we go through. So this was something that Caroline pointed out. An effective hyperdoc or a hyperslide should be able to run itself. So that really means that you've got to put a lot of thought and intentionality into your doc. You have to really think through it. And I absolutely love the way you hand it over to your husband and ask him whether or not it makes sense. Like that is feasible, because that's somebody who doesn't have the content knowledge. So if you can get someone, whether that be another teaching partner who's not in your same content, to look through it, or your spouse, I think that's a wonderful tip. We also heard about YouTube videos, embedding those. And I will tell you, that's one reason why Hyperslides is kind of becoming more popular than Hyperdocs. So with docs, we really can't embed the YouTube videos. There was like an extension that I was going to suggest, but then when we looked at it, it wasn't really working right. So Hyperslides actually allow you to embed those YouTube videos, and the students can play them right from the slide. So it makes it easier for them. Formatting tables. So I love the way that Emily pointed out that she does all of hers with tables, and tables are a phenomenal way to do your Hyperslides, because you can do a lot with tables. You can change background colors. I love the way that Corey pointed out that she puts a different color for where they need to take their notes. Kids are very visual, so they need that support. They need to know, okay, this color means I read it, this color means I fill it in. If we can get consistent with that, that's so helpful for our students. You can change borders, you can format single cells, so much that you can do when it comes to formatting tables. The other thing that I just wanted to share with you real quick is there are tools everywhere. So I think the scariest thing when it comes to Hyperdocs and Hyperslides is, where do I start? And how do I do this? Because this seems overwhelming. And I think the biggest thing to tell you is, do not start from scratch. There are way too many things that are already out there. There are 1,000,003 templates. There are amazing teachers like the ones that we've had on here today, who, if you say, hey, anybody have anything good on Rome? There are people who will say, here's what I've got. And then you take that and you adjust it to meet your needs. So I've embedded a lot of really good resources. You can click on them to actually get a little bit more information. And I just want to give a big shout out to our Texas Council of Social Studies President-elect, Renee Blackman. She actually did an article this month on Hyperdocs and Hyperslides. So that is linked here for you. And the really cool part about it is she gave you access to an entire folder full of Hyperdocs and Hyperslides. Take those, see what someone else has already created, and then adjust it to meet your needs. Anytime you run into a Hyperdoc or a Hyperslide like that, make a copy of it. And then once you make a copy, that's yours to play with however you want to play. So you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, am I messing up what Emily started? Or, am I messing up what Carolyn's got going on? No, if you make a copy before you get started, now the copy is yours to kind of edit and create. The one thing I will say is always try to give credit back to the originator. So if it's something that you adjusted, just make sure you leave a slide on there that says original came from so-and-so. I think that's just good etiquette. The last thing I included is just a ton of templates for you. So I hope that these are useful. I know that Gabriel wanted to leave some time for questions, and I want to be here for that as well. So any technical questions we can answer for you, anything that we can assist you with just to, get started or take it even further.
One tip I would like to share is, each year before you decide to use this in your class, go back and make sure all of your links are still working. Sometimes those links disappear, or the district will decide to block something that wasn't previously blocked. I'll often have, if I have a student aide in a class, I'll have that student aide check the assignment to make sure everything is still unblocked or the links are still working for the students. And sometimes they won't be. Or like one of the presenters showed, they'll download the documents into their Google Drive, and then they'll link them from their Google Drive, like I did for that Good Morning America video. But that's a good tip, is to always make sure your links are still working from year to year.
The other thing I would say is don't be afraid of trends. So there are things that kids are just interested in. So I love the way that Sarah talked about Bitmojis. So right now, one of the biggest trends, you've probably seen it all over your Facebook or Twitter, are teachers creating Bitmoji scenes or classrooms. Use those. Like, how fun would it be for kids to be able to hover over to find things in a little tiny little history room you've created, and they could find pieces, you know, to go through it. You know, think outside the box, you know, TikTok videos, embedding those in, grab the kids where they are and use those pieces.
I mentioned this in the chat, but one of the biggest things that I like to do is, what do I want the students to learn at the end of this? So I plan backwards. What's the goal? What do I want them to meet? And then I meet my slides according to that goal. I found that if you just start doing your slides based on like some of these odds and ends, your slides and overall just kind of seem like a hot mess, and there's no like continuity between all of them, and they don't really align together. So when you have the goal in mind and you plan backwards, it looks cohesive, and you can kind of narrow down and focus what you want to include, what might you need to put off and add to another slide, or it might be something that you focus on more of like a one-on-one instruction. So really having that end goal in mind is really going to help you narrow down and focus on what you want to include and how you want to present that information to the students.
Someone asked in the chat, how long does this creating one of these presentations take? That's where I would kind of piggyback off of what Caroline said. As long as you know what it is you're wanting to accomplish, what your goal is, that's definitely 90% of the battle. And then really having the kind of that map in mind helps you know, okay, what websites do I need to look for? What am I wanting to link for the students? Like when I started with the one that I just showed you guys, the Roaring 20s, I knew exactly I was taking something that I'd previously done in one format and recreating it in this format. So I knew exactly what I wanted to accomplish. I'm just figuring out a different way to do that. But it's finding the links and then figuring out, you know, kind of what you want the slideshow to, how you want that to match your objective is what takes the longest. Once you've set up those original slides, then it's duplicating those slides and kind of recreating your questions and things for each one. But once you have that done, that, you know, that can take a good couple of hours to start with, finding those links. And then after that, it's just duplicating and tweaking. But it's not something that you can do in a half hour or so. It does take a little bit of work, but then you have it done and you can just, you know, tweak it each year as you need to.
I'll also reuse resources in lecture and review. So some of those videos that were in the presentation that I gave, students saw in lecture, but I don't know if they're paying attention to it the first time around. And if I think it's a really strong video or a really strong article, I'll add it again. And they might have seen it, they might be able to familiar with it, but if it's something that I truly believe is going to help them in their learning, I'm just going to give that to them again, and hopefully the second time around maybe it will sink in. If the first time around they were zoning out or sleeping with their eyes open, I teach 9th through 12th graders, so I often find that they just zone out even with a short video. And the videos that I embed, I try to make no more than 8 minutes or so, just for that attention span. I think that when you have the videos embedding, if you're giving long videos, that sometimes they'll tune out. If I want them to watch the whole video, I'll slice the video up. So I'll format it in Google Slides, I'll right click it, format it, where do I want it to start, where do I want it to end, and then I'll duplicate the video on another slide and pick up where it left off. So I'll give them a break between articles. So maybe they're watching a video on slide 3, they'll read an article on slide 4, and they'll go back to the video on maybe slide 5 or 6. So they're not watching the video all at once, and it breaks it up to hopefully give them more of the attention to what I want them to pull from that information.
Okay, we have a little bit of time. One of the teachers, she's presented in some of the other chats. She has a slide, a Hyperdoc as well, that she would like to share. Miss Waddell from Georgia, and it's about colonial Georgia and the colonial colonization.
Hi guys. Well, listen, I really appreciate everybody and all their tips and everything. I really liked the one that said, you know, whenever you go to link things, think about doing that on Google Drive. So instead of linking on YouTube, then you would link to the video that you already had loaded on Google Drive. I know in my district, I can get things to work on my teacher laptop, and then whenever the kids to go do it on their Chromebooks, I see some of you nodding. It's like, crap, that link won't work. Well, listen, I came across this. Let me see. How about this? I'm just going to copy and paste the link so that you can all go to this on your computer. I don't know a lot about this. This is something that I came across recently in another chat, in another professional development. So there's this website called Symbaloo. It's really a way for you to put all of your bookmarks on one place. But I also came across this learning paths. And again, don't ask me a lot of questions. I really don't know. It's something I've discovered like within the last week. And it's a way for you to like design a little game board. And there are quite a few that are already made, so you can certainly look at theirs. This is one that I came across. This is not mine by any stretch of the imagination, but you can see it's got multiple paths, so multiple choices. At the end, there's a writing assignment that they can do. There are questions that you can embed. There are videos that you can embed, and that sort of thing. So I have seen this mentioned quite a few other places and just kind of wanted to share the resource. I know one of my ELA teachers at the school did a great one this year on Romeo and Juliet with his 9th grade lit class. So I think this could be another great resource for you to just kind of put in your pocket. It's similar to the idea of the Hyperdoc in that it's the list of tasks, the list of things that you can have the kids do. I like the element of choice. And then I also think, you know, particularly, you know, those of us in the middle school world, it's got kind of that cutesy appeal. So a kid looking at that with a little game piece, and it moves like as you progress through, it moves the little game piece along. So I just kind of wanted to share that with everybody. I know, I'm sure everyone has lots of things that they explore during the summertime. I know I always do. I tuck things away that I don't really have time to look at, and then I come back and look at them later. So this is definitely a bookmark this. From my understanding, Symbaloo is free to join, so it's not like you have to pay anything, and it's free all the time. It's not just one of those things that's free right now that's going to go back to being something to pay for later on in the fall. So that's all. Thanks for letting me share.
Welcome. Anyone else with anything to share? Any Hyperdocs, slides, tips, things that worked for you, or any other questions of any of the panelists?
I can't say that I created the entire Hyperdoc because it was actually, I found it belonged to somebody else, and when I clicked on her links, many of them didn't work anymore. So I just emailed her and said, hey, I'm interested in this. Do you mind if I change some links? She was like very open, you know, so it took me forever. And this was a presentation that was already created. I was just filling in links. But I got so busy like clicking on all the links and reading and seeing where it would take me and adding things that like when I heard that this was happening, I was thinking, oh my goodness, all right. So I'm gonna do this. But you guys are all rock stars at Hyperdocs or, you know, Hyperslides. It's gonna take me all summer to practice this. And I plan on doing quite a few. So I teach in a STEM building. It's a public school, but it's a STEM building and with a high gifted population. And so they love things like this. So I don't know, I'm excited to do it, but it's very, like it's a steep goal for me. So, I mean,
You've got it, Libby.
I'm building, I'm the social studies teacher in a science, technology, engineering, math building. So I'll just leave that there.
Don't be afraid to ask the kids for help too. If you have a student that you really trust, especially in a STEM building, there's probably some kids who are really technologically oriented. But yes, you've got it. You can do it.
Yeah.
And I like these because like I had quite a few, I would add extension slides on during virtual learning. And a lot of my gifted students, like I had one on the Middle Ages, and I gave them information on like Minecraft and some other kind of STEM stuff. And I had quite a few kids that then sent me their Minecraft manners that they built. So I think these can really help with the gifted kids because you can add at the end those extensions. I know that is then another thing to look up, but when I got feedback, a lot of them like these because they got to do extra things that they maybe normally didn't get to because they were waiting on other kids to finish.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You know, that was some of the articles that I linked. I did have a couple inclusion classes and a wide range of abilities. So I'd actually linked different articles for different students. And so my school's fortunate enough we have Muzello. So I would go in and I would change the lexicon, and I would actually assign like my lower level reading students like this article, and then I would just change the lexicon and assign it to like my middle reading level, and then the ones that are way beyond their year, it was at highest. So it's the same format. What I would do is in the title of the Hyperslide, I would just put in parentheses like a code for me that I would know is this going to be like the low, the medium, and the high. So I might say like the red group or the yellow group or the blue group. So when the students are seeing the slides and they see the title, they're not feeling excluded, that they're just like, oh, red group, like, okay, well, maybe you're doing for this and then maybe you're doing it for that. But I think that when you're giving articles that you can really personalize it for that level of the student. You can give them an overarching theme that's the same, but maybe the article that they're reading is just different, that they can understand, that they can be able to comprehend, especially if you have students that are L and English is not their first language.
Okay, anyone else with anything to share? Any documents, slides, whatever? Some of the comment questions, some of the private questions are, first off, everyone said the panelists are doing a great job, so they're really appreciative of that. We are planning to do additional panels over summer. Mr. McAllister, who's in this group, he's going to be doing one next week on U.S. history. We're also going to be doing one on formative assessments next Thursday. We're going to start geography, world history. If you are into any of them, let me know. I'm on the Social Studies Network on Facebook or on Twitter, Social Studies TX. We're always looking for people to continue pushing teachers to join us, to be panelists. If you have a great idea, other people, we can find people to work with you. We all have a great network and we're all better together. So anytime, just reach out to me or anyone else. Okay, anything else? I will be working on editing over the summer. My 5 days off, or in 5 days I'll have the summer off, so I'll start editing and I'll post these videos on YouTube.
Can may I send you sort of works in progress for your feedback, any of you?
Sure, we'd love that.
Okay.
Can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Sometimes my microphone doesn't catch up. So I'm in a little different position because I'm not in the classroom and I'm not in a school division anymore. My name's Annie, and you might have seen me on Twitter or on the Facebook page, but I work with a new project called New American History, and we just launched in January, about 2.5 months before we all got sent home. So it was kind of an odd launch. And anyway, I work with Ed Ayers, who's a historian based here in Virginia. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with his work, but we are trying to put more engaging and truthful American history lessons out there into the world. So we have, small group of resources that are posted. I'm always looking for feedback. We posted one today that is on the pandemic, but it's comparing it to 1918.
Oh, yeah.
The main reason we kind of put it out there is because we're concerned about the way people are in such a rush to get back out there we fear that they're not going to take lessons from history about what happened in previous pandemics. So I think it's a powerful topic. I did a focus group with kids, which is why I was a little late to this, because I started them earlier in the day and I thought they'd only be good for 45 minutes to an hour, and they kept me on there for 2.5 hours. Like, they didn't want to leave, and they were having so much fun. They were in 5 different cities. I think they were just starved for attention, to be honest with you. And their parents were happy to give me them the whole day if I would have taken them. But I got really good feedback from the kids. So I'll put the link in the chat, I think, if this works. I would, if any of you guys want to email me, or I'm on the Facebook group with Gabe, and I'm on Twitter as Matt Maker. I would love your feedback on that or any of the other lessons. And if I can ever be of help, I'm like, if you want to send me your thing, Libby, I would love to look at it. I love looking at anything anybody creates. And I love when Gabe says we all work better together, because that's been like my whole way I've tried to approach teaching for the last few decades. So I appreciate this group